Good morning. Today we're going to finish chapter 6 in the book of Nehemiah. We're going to read verses 15 to the end, and then we're going to see the recap the 10 leadership lessons from the first 6 books of Nehemiah. So starting in verse 15, it says, So the wall was finished on the 25th day in the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem. But they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Moreover, in those days the nobles of Judah sent letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, as his wife. As they spoke of his good deeds in the presence and reported my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. So we see here that in the last section, Nehemiah stayed the course, and then in this section, he finished strong. It was the end of the wall. We started in verse 15 by saying that the wall was completed. So when the wall was completed, we see 4 distinct things happen. And I think we see these things happen over and over again when we finish projects or when we complete things for the Lord. So first, God is glorified. They look at the wall and they say, how could this have been done in such a short time? It must have been with the help of their God. So God is glorified. And then next, it says that the people are unified. Because they finished this project together and they built a wall, which is a defense for their nation, the people are unified around that. And they're unified around the fact that their God is glorified. Next, we see Nehemiah is justified because he built, it was his plan, his vision from the Lord. And when it came to completion, he feels justified in leading his people to complete this task. Yes, the Lord had told me to do this thing, and I know that the Lord was behind it because it was completed with his help. And then finally, Israel's enemies are terrified. You see, they're still trying to intimidate him, and they're afraid that Israel has joined together, and now they have this sort of what they're calling military, but they have this protection, this wall to protect them. So again, God's glorified, people are unified, Nehemiah is justified, and enemies are terrified. Disheartened enemies are a sign that God has been at work. I'll say that again. The disheartened enemies are a sign that God has been at work in the lives of Israel. But let's not forget, if we go in reverse, what's the inverse of the 4 things that we just learned? What if God is not being glorified? What if the people are not unified? What if there's disunity in the church? What if the works of the leadership team are not justified and things aren't getting done? What if your enemies aren't terrified, but they're emboldened? What does that mean? Well, first of all, I think we need to take a temperature check. If those things are the case for us, we need to be aware of the fact that we're not getting things done for the Lord, and maybe we're not doing what the Lord wants us to do. We need to reevaluate whether or not He is helping this come to pass. Remember, the first thing is that God helped the wall get built. So if we're not completing things and we see disunity and our enemies are emboldened, maybe the problem is that the Lord has not been blessing or accomplishing this thing that we're trying to do. The next question I would ask is, if that's the case and there's disunity and there's not justification for the project and your enemies are emboldened, take personal responsibility. What can I do to reverse course and get us back on track? I think a lot of times we try to blame other people. But what we really need to do is take personal responsibility for the fact that God has entrusted us to do a good work in this life. So what can you do this week to turn it around? What can you do to be a positive for glorified, justified, unified, and terrified? How can you be a plus and not a minus in those columns this week to the people around you and the things that God's doing in your life? Take a personal, actionable step. Finally, let's recap the 10 things that we've learned from the first 6 chapters of Nehemiah. When you want to get something done for the Lord, you pray about it to God, you announce the goal, you visualize the project, you motivate the people, you delegate the work, you overcome the opposition, remove the obstacles, end the oppression, stay the course, and finish strong. And that's the first part of Nehemiah. The Lord be with you today.